I got a different hat on today. I'm doing a short video because there's reports coming from Lebanon about ongoing investigations about Israel using depleted uranium. So, what does this actually mean? So, first, is Israel using depleted uranium? Most likely. It's pretty common. Some of the more recent controversies, um, you first, just some like notable um, sort of what do you call it, telegraphing that UK has provided depleted uranium to Ukrainian forces. Um, Also, just remnants of the U.S.'s campaigns in the Iraq War. Um, there's some evidence that depleted uranium can cause some pretty serious side effects. Like if we're putting on our medical brain real quick, depleted uranium can be the cause of really serious side effects. It's typically not considered like a highly radiological material, um, and there's no studies that show a direct correlation. However, there's regions where there's unexplained like congenital defects and stuff in Iraq, and like the entire families have elevated uranium levels, even if even when like they go out and do ecological testing, you can't really detect if there's uranium left over. Um, so some people might say, well, how did it get there? But you know, there's a non-zero probability that depleted uranium can do that. But uranium isn't really a chemical weapon. It's not considered that. Depleted uranium is not. And there's not like a formal convention or like a line that says you cannot use depleted uranium. What is depleted uranium? It's a heavy metal, right? So if you put yourself in, and it's, yeah, and so if you put yourself in like the seat of someone who is designing weapons for a military, why would you ever use this material, especially if there's these other side effects? Is that actually what you want? And it's not, right? When you think of things like anti-tank rounds, anything anti-vehicle, anti-ship rounds, and some other use cases like the most popular stuff to talk about right now is like rail guns and these high-speed rounds where there's not really a defense against them, and how you can construct something that, like, if you want to put on a Hollywood movie or something, like you could consider like a rail round that's traveling at like a mile a second or whatever it is, that goes through like the Congress building and then explodes with 1 million pellets or something like that. Like these these are the types of things that a military or a weapons designer will normally think about. These scenarios: how do you stop a tank? How do you get into a building or some other hardened target? And what's your goal, or what are you trying to accomplish? And so the two cases where Israel is probably using depleted uranium is first on missiles, and secondly, they probably do have anti-tank capabilities with depleted uranium tips. Now, why would that be? And it's really simple. It's because depleted uranium is cheap or free. It's cheap or free, and it's a great material for this type of thing. And so if you're going for superiority, first, you can build a lot of depleted uranium rounds for very cheap, and second, they do exactly what you want them to do. They're almost twice as hard, not quite twice as hard as like a traditional like steel or lead round or something like that. So you can get deeper penetration, and second, it's not like the most stable metal, so when it impacts something, it will explode, it'll catch on fire. And so if you have a anti-tank round, you can build a depleted uranium round, it goes through the tank, and it catches everything on fire. Compare this to like a normal sort of old generation anti-tank round. You can shoot it at the tank. You're probably going to fuck up the tank, but you might not fuck up the tank, right? And so what message does that send? That we can only, 2/3 of the time we can hit your shit, and you're going to be pretty okay with it. Yeah, and so, if you look at just other alternatives, why would we ever use this sort of, if this material's not really ideal for those sort of use cases or scenarios, why would you use it? Well, traditionally, it's just the engineering properties of it and the fact that it's, again, like cheap or free. because it comes from power plants and stuff like that. You can just use depleted uranium, or like metals like tungsten are very expensive to work with because they're so hard. They're really difficult to do anything with. Just learning all this, right? And like different alloys and stuff like that are also typically just more expensive, right? You have to have, it's a more complex value chain. You can't just get it for cheaper for free. And then you're still sort of asking, well, are the properties of the metal actually better for this? And is this like something we want to mass deploy? And so when you just think of having like something like a semi-automatic round or something at 20 millimeters, or you're thinking about having a warehouse full of, 5,000 or 10,000 missiles, you're not bejeweling them, you're not doing anything. They're just supposed to do the simple thing they're supposed to do, and depleted uranium does that, and it's cheaper free. And so, you can look it up, other stuff, I think I read somewhere the half-life is like 15 days or something, so human bodies can eliminate it. There's not like a deterministic effect that you get cancer if you touch it. It's not like like the Fukushima power plant and stuff like that. But it is, again, they're not using this on like baby toys, right? This is a military application, and it's cheaper free, the material, you manufacture it, and then you shoot it at something because you're going to kill the thing or kill the thing that's inside of it, right? That's the point of that. And again, it just has that, if you need to understand this a different way, it's got that little 5, 10, 15, 20% thing extra that gives people confidence that whatever they have is better at doing that thing than the other person. The tool you have is capable of doing that job a couple times over. And those are the same sort of capabilities that you have elsewhere. So it's not an antagonist against like weapons design, and it's not like a protagonist for it. It's cheaper free, and the material does the thing. So in Lebanon right now, there's a few, I think, like formal complaints that have been raised that Israel's used both white phosphorus, which lights on fire right away, burns incredibly hot. I saw that somewhere, and then now they're saying that, well, they're using these depleted uranium rounds in cities, which you probably shouldn't be doing. Israel say, well, you shouldn't have tanks and missiles in cities, and whatever. You shouldn't have weapons that you're using to like wage an illegal war in a city. And I'll say okay or something like that. Yeah. And so it's just interesting, right? Because we often want to, just like the philosophy or something behind this is like often we really want to like deeply relate to the tools and technology we use. This is a really silly juxtaposition, but if you're using Google for work or the Microsoft Business Suite or something like that, you're saying like, oh, like look, in like 2 or 3 months, I'm gonna be really good at knowing where to click the buttons, how to add things, how to move things to different folders, how to keep everything organized, how to have that sort of enterprise permissions and stuff like that. If you want to reduce this all down, I'm sure there's a more nuanced way to say this. There might not be, though. Like, when you decide to use depleted uranium or something else, what you're actually saying is, this stuff is all going to be a little bit better, and we're going to have more of it. And so what does that? How much of it and where? Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, when you get into commentary about is Israel committing a war crime by doing this? Probably. There's probably some illegality that's going on or something, and you'll have someone else say, well, look, if you look at militaries of the world, we can step out our front door and find 500,000 to 5 million, whatever the number is, of whatever type of ammunition you need. You're going to find it in tank barrels ready to fire. You're going to find it in long guns on warships. You're going to find it on railguns on warships. And you're going to find it on the tips of missiles of everything from bombers to fighter jets. You can find this stuff anywhere. No one's trying to cover anything up or hide anything. There's not like some conspiracy going on. And if you go after a nation like Israel, this is going to be the argument they'll make in front of the UN if they ever have to talk about this. They're going to say, well, if you go after a nation that wasn't planning on going to war with you, you hadn't talked about it, you hadn't decided it, they decided they didn't want to do this, and you're not driving tanks at them for some reason, and so you still get the stuff that's supposed to be dropped out of a plane and dropped on a tank or something. You're getting something that's meant to take down a building that's supposed to penetrate 20 or 30 feet, and that's what it's doing. Surprise. You know, if you wanted to alleviate the powder keg or the pressure cooker, well, you did. You know, you got the thing that was supposed to do that, and you're just getting it now and here, which might not be legal again, you know, but who's to say? Yeah. Yeah. So who knows? I don't want to speculate and say that this is all like signaling, saying that like, well, we can go all day if you can go all day because we're getting our stuff again for cheap or free. Like more or less, that's what this is. You know, we've got some guy graduated from Princeton or somewhere else. Whatever, you take your pick of university. There's always a couple. This guy can just make, you know, explosives and rocket fuel, you know, by the barrel. He's got this big thing like Breaking Bad or something, and we're just gonna go rubber band some like hard alloys on top of it, and then if that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing. We don't need to put little like electronic charges and everything that are sensing ambient air temperature and pressure and have some special algorithm built into like a Raspberry Pi and they blow up or something. You know, there's some like weird electronic thing that like is just really good at knowing where it's at in this like, you know, a fractional percent of the entire journey of the weapon or something. So glorious. So glorious, but yeah. And I'm sure someone else will say like, you know, if we can look at the military budgets and say that in some senses there's a lot of waste, but in some senses they're really efficient because they talk about waste so much. You know, what else is there that I don't know? It's all pretty horrible. That's the video.